3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The day is 16th of July, 1969. Saturn V, the first rocket to carry a manned mission to the moon, leaves the Kennedy Space Center at 9:32 local time. 5 days later, the entire world holds its breath as Neil Armstrong becomes the first human to set foot on the moon. The world is celebrating. People who made this great achievement possible will always be remembered. Among them is the chief architect of the Apollo Saturn V rocket, Wernher von Braun. To most, he's NASA's rocket genius. But for the few out there, he's a villain, person behind the project that could have ended the world if the Nazis weren't stopped. Wernher von Braun's story begins some half a century earlier, in interwar Germany. Although born into an old Prussian family, Werner's far from the typical aristocrat's son. Instead of diligently studying for school, he spends hours observing the stars.
When I grow up, I will go to the moon.
And he means it. At just 15, he builds a rocket-powered car, a project that leaves his mother, Amy, speechless.
He's like a sponge, absorbing every scrap of knowledge.
But his father, Magnus Baron von Braun, is far less impressed. A towering figure in young Werner's life, Magnus sees his son's struggle with school as a flaw, a disgrace to the family's tradition. To him, Werner's fascination with space and rockets is merely a childish distraction. Yet Werner's curiosity refuses to be silenced. When he discovers Hermann Oberth's The Rocket to Planetary Spaces, a spark ignites. The book reveals a world where space isn't a mere fantasy, but something that could one day be reached. But soon, Werner will have to choose between the romanticism of his dreams and the harsh reality of a dark adult world. And that time approaches faster than he thinks. In 1930, at the age of 18, von Braun attends the Technical University of Berlin. It's a period of deep crisis for Germany, maybe the worst of its modern history. And while everything around him crumbles, von Braun's obsession with space travel somehow thrives. His first major step comes that same year, when he joins the Society for Space Travel, a German rocket society dedicated to advancing space exploration. At first, the connection seems innocent, even logical. As he later explains,
rocket propulsion and the idea of spaceflight are the real reason why I decided to study engineering in the first place.
I suppose we can safely believe him on that. But where the society gets funding for their projects will perhaps not surprise the more suspicious among you. It's the military. At that time, the German army was bound by the Treaty of Versailles, imposed after its defeat in World War I in 1918. The treaty placed strict limits on Germany's military capabilities, especially on new technologies like tanks and airplanes. But rockets? Rockets weren't even a thing back then. And here's the loophole. When the society contacts the German army requesting funding, the generals immediately see the opportunity. If they could cloak rocket research under the guise of scientific exploration, no one can accuse them of violating the treaty. But of course, they also know that if they can attach some explosives to those rockets, well, you all know what happens next. And if you know it, von Braun knew it better. Soon, the army recruits von Braun for classified rocket research at their base in Kummensdorf, just outside Berlin. Despite early setbacks and deadly accidents, their efforts eventually succeed. By December 1933, they launched their first rocket, marking a turning point to rocket development and to von Braun's career. By this time, Hitler has seized power, and the link between rocket research and the Nazi regime is re-established. With Hitler's backing, just 2 months later, in November, von Braun makes a strange decision that brings him even closer to the Nazis. He joins the Riding Club of the SS, the notorious Nazi bodyguard organization that would later become deeply involved in orchestrating the unimaginable genocide that claims the lives of millions, the Holocaust. Was his connection with this murderous organization a coincidence? Right after his first contact with Hitler? Von Braun later downplays this connection, saying,
I was there twice a week and took riding lessons. The entire outfit never participated in any activities outside the riding school during my connection with it. In the summer of 1934, I was discharged from the unit.
When confronted later in the US about his Nazi connection, von Braun repeatedly insisted that he was driven only by his childhood dream, rocket development and space exploration. But his early collaboration with the Nazis suggests that there may have been more to it. Peenemünde is a top-secret military research center and one of the most notorious sites known in history. And this says a lot. In this remote area in northeast Germany, the Nazis will do their best to develop rockets for their war plans. And can you guess who proposed this place?
Where should we go? Also take a look at Peenemünde. My father used to shoot ducks there. You know, this is a wide area, uninhabited, but very pretty. And it was really love at first sight.
Exactly, Werner von Braun. And he's rewarded for it by becoming a technical director at just 25 years old. Initially, he oversees a team of 350, but soon that number grows into the thousands. But to be able to rise this high and higher, he first needs to really become a Nazi, not only act like one. On November 12, 1937, von Braun formally applies for membership in the party, officially a Nazi. Von Braun initially focuses on his rocket projects, and by October 1938, the first rocket, the A5, successfully launches, reaching altitudes of 12 kilometers and a range of 18 kilometers. But the Nazis want more. Hitler himself visits Peenemünde on March 23, 1939, von Braun's 27th birthday, and he isn't there to celebrate. Germany's gearing up for war, and Hitler's eager to ensure that everything's ready before launching an all-out assault on the war.
You know, normally people were pretty much impressed by the noise, but he didn't say a word. And then we showed him a model of the A3, you know, with gyroscopes and all these things, and he listened quietly to my explanations, and at the end he turned away shaking his head. So I had the distinct impression that he felt that thing will never work, or a crazy idea or something like this.
Much more direct sign that the Nazis are not there for science comes in the spring of 1940 when von Braun comes in contact Heinrich Himmler, number 2 in the Nazi party and the leader of the SS. Maybe this acquaintance reminded von Braun of his horse riding lessons back in his student days. Himmler has sent a messenger asking von Braun to join his paramilitary organization. He surely isn't the type of man who takes no for an answer, and on May 1st, 1940, von Braun officially becomes an SS officer. And he will certainly be a marvelous one. His development of the A4 rocket, later known as the V2, is indeed a technological breakthrough. It's much more stable and easier to control than any rocket before, with an unbelievable range of 320 kilometers. The first successful launch on October 3rd, 1942, is a moment of excitement.
Second only to the atom bomb, V2 was the war's deadliest weapon. It even killed the men who had spent their lives perfecting it. Observers look on from concreted pits, and this time they really get something to see as the V2 plunges earthwards.
But the rocket is still not ready for operational use. Its accuracy remains limited, making it unreliable for specific targets, like London. 2 more years are necessary for its full development. But Hitler doesn't have 2 years. After the catastrophic defeat in Stalingrad in February 1943, he desperately needs a wonder weapon to turn the tide of the war. On July 8, 1943, he calls von Braun and his superior, General Dornberger, to discuss the rocket. This time, Hitler is at last ecstatic with what he sees.
At the end of the film, he made an interesting remark. He apologized to General Dornberger for not having believed in him, which is, I think, one of the very rare cases on record where he apologized to anyone. And he then apparently forgot about his infallible dreams quite abruptly, said, we think we have something pretty formidable here, and ordered immediately the highest priority to put the thing into quantity production.
He made Professor von Braun professor. He made me general and all this kind of stuff. You know what happens in such a situation.
But his excitement doesn't last long. British intelligence learns of the project, and in August 1943, the Royal Air Force bombs Peenemünde, crippling the facility. In response, the Nazis relocate the rocket production to the heart of Germany. And here, von Braun's journey takes a turn to the worst. After this point, it's no longer just titles and honors. It's about making real fatal decisions. Von Braun continues his research in the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp in Thuringia. This is not a scientific center anymore. It's a slave factory. Thousands upon thousands of prisoners work here. The conditions are horrific. There's no space to sleep, no sanitation, and no proper food. The work is brutal, building the tunnels where rockets will be constructed. Many prisoners die within days. Of the 60,000 who work at Dora over the next year and a half, 20,000 perish, a third of them.
It still bothers me. Dora Mittelbau. We just knew it as Dora now. What I saw was all of these dead people laid outdoors. They're on the ground. And it looked like acres of them. Medics were in there. And they had all of these people that were nearly dead. They were just barely alive. I know I didn't see all of it. What we didn't see at all was the underground factories that they had seen. That was back under the Hartz Mountains, and these were slave laborers.
There's no way Von Braun is unaware of this. As the project leader, he visits the site immediately after it opens between the 29th of August and the 2nd of September, and frequently after that. A survivor's testimony is revealing.
The Meister immediately started shouting it was sabotage, when just at that point, Von Braun arrived accompanied by his usual group of people. Without even listening to my explanations, he ordered the Meister to have me given 25 strokes in his presence by an SS who was there. Then, judging that the strokes weren't sufficiently hard, he ordered I be flogged more vigorously, and his order was then diligently carried out. I think it's pertinent to point out that I knew who Von Braun was because he had already come into our hall for rapid inspections. He couldn't fail to see the abominable conditions of the deportees and his inhumanity, I would say his cruelty, of which I was personally a victim, I would say, an eloquent testimony to his Nazi fanaticism.
And it's not just the testimonies. In a letter from August 15th, 1944 to Albin Svatsky, the director of the Mittelwerk factory, Von Braun himself writes,
During one of my last visits, you made the suggestion that the good technical training of various prisoners available to you and the Buchenwald concentration camp should be used to carry out additional development work and to build prototypes in small numbers. I immediately accepted your suggestion, selected a few OSA-suitable prisoners to Giese Dr. Simon in Buchenwald, and obtained their transfer to the Mittelwerk.
In March 1944, Von Braun's relationship with the Nazis and the SS takes an unexpected turn. On the evening of March 5th, a chilly Sunday night, Von Braun and his colleagues unwind at a house party on Usedom Island in northern Germany, discussing the Peenemünde project and its future after the war.
A colleague and I, in particular, thought of the old days at the Berlin rocket airfield, when we dreamed of landing on the moon one day. During the conversation, we became particularly aware of the situation we were in. We thought about space travel and were forced to build rockets that would bring death and destruction. With each new glass we drank, we felt more exhilarated and played out our starry dream in every conceivable variation.
The discussion soon reaches Himmler's ears and is not taken well. As Germany faces defeat, any questioning of Nazi military policy or its rocket program is swiftly perceived as treason. In the early hours of March 15th, Von Braun and two colleagues are arrested by the Gestapo, the German secret police. His superiors learn of the situation much later that day.
This morning, Professor Von Braun was arrested by the secret state police for sabotaging Project of 4 and taken to Stettin.
They're furious. Von Braun is indispensable for the rocket project, and his detainment is a huge blow. The Nazis have just shot themselves in the foot.
I am prepared to vouch for this man with my head,
Dornberger insistently says. However, it takes 2 long weeks for the charges to be dropped, finally allowing Von Braun to return to work. This arrest will do a lot of heavy lifting later in his life to support his claim that he was just a neutral scientist coerced into collaboration with the regime. What is indisputable, however, is von Braun's role in bringing the rocket into operational use. By September 1944, the A-4 rocket is rebranded as the V-2, Vengeance Weapon 2. On September 8, 1944, at precisely 1843, the first V-2 strikes London. Over the next 7 months, 1,300 of these rockets rain down on England, with 500 directly hitting London. The devastation is staggering. More than 2,700 civilians lose their lives, and nearly 6,500 are injured. An indiscriminate terror campaign targeting civilians, and the terror extends beyond London. In Antwerp, a vibrant city turned battlefield, the first V-2 strikes in October. In just a few harrowing seconds, lives are shattered as buildings crumble, sending a shockwave of fear through the streets. Over the course of the bombardment, approximately 7,000 residents face a grim fate. Their stories lost amid the rubble after 1,610 rockets hit the historic city. The assault doesn't stop there. Other cities across France, Belgium, and the Netherlands suffer the same fate. The relentless attacks transformed thriving neighborhoods into hauntingly silent ghost towns. Yet the technology behind this deadly weapon remains highly coveted in 1945, ultimately becoming the lifeline for its creator. May 2nd, 1945. In the midst of war's dying chaos, a convoy of vehicles moves through the snow-covered Alps. Among the passengers is Wernher von Braun, his arm in a sling from a car accident. They carry no weapons, only blueprints and technical documents. The end's near. Germany's in ruin, its cities bombed to rubble, and its armies in retreat. Amidst the chaos and terrified of Hitler's fury, von Braun is fleeing. He's seeking out the Americans. Unsurprisingly, he prefers them to the Soviets. The stakes are high, and after crossing Austria, von Braun and his team make their move. They walk through the American lines, exhausted and uncertain, but determined. When von Braun's brother, Magnus, finds an American soldier, he says just one thing.
My name is Magnus von Braun. My brother invented the V2. We want to surrender.
The Americans waste no time seizing this opportunity, swiftly recruiting von Braun. Officially, it's a matter of national security, but for von Braun, it's much more. He's found a way out of the collapsing Nazi regime, stepping from the ashes of the past into a future of limitless possibility. But soon alarms are raised over von Braun's ties to the Nazi regime, particularly his involvement in the use of slave labor. For Americans who had just fought a brutal war against the Nazis, it seems unthinkable that one of them, a figure entangled in war crimes, could now come to work in the US, let alone lead critical technological programs. As late as 1947, von Braun is still seen as a security risk, with his future hanging in the balance. Yet his knowledge and expertise outweigh any ethical reservations as the race against the Soviet Union takes precedence. The enemy is no longer the Nazis, it's the commies. And so the world's most controversial rocket scientist undergoes a remarkable transformation, a rebranding so effective that today's influencers and media celebrities would envy. He achieves this in two ways. First, by promoting himself as a dreamer, the advocate of space travel that he always was. Starting in the early 1950s, von Braun gives lectures, writes for popular magazines, and becomes a familiar face on television. He even appears on the children's program Disneyland. His media presence skyrockets, elevating his fame to the point where his autographs are traded for a 2-to-1 ratio for those of Elvis Presley. With his charismatic smile and an aura of mystery as someone who holds the keys to the future, von Braun finds post-war America the perfect stage for his reinvention. Still, questions about his past inevitably surface, but he seems remarkably detached from the moral implications of his wartime activities. When asked about his involvement in Nazi policies, he downplays his role, claiming he simply did what was necessary under the difficult circumstances of the time. Some things, he says, he can't even remember.
I confess to no deep psychological thinking on this matter during those times.
As for the use of slave labor, von Braun initially avoids testifying at the 1947 Dora trial concerning the Mittelbau Dora concentration camp. When he finally takes the stand, he focuses on defending George Riquet, the general director of the Mittelwerk factory, emphasizing improvements rather than confronting the horrific conditions of the camp. This choice suggests that von Braun aims to protect Riquet from scrutiny, possibly shielding himself from revelations about his own complicity. Ultimately, Riquet is acquitted, but it is probably Braun himself who is actually saved. Regarding his own involvement, von Braun insists he never set foot in the camp itself, only visiting the nearby factory. He remains steadfast in distancing himself from the atrocities that unfolded in the shadows of his project.
During my visit to Mittelwerk, I never saw a dead man. I never saw any kind of abuse or killing. During later visits, I heard rumors that some abuse had occurred and that some prisoners had been hanged in the underground galleries because of sabotage. I never saw this myself and don't know either who recounted this to me.
Remember, we talked about 20,000 dead people here, and he hasn't even seen one. Slowly but steady, burying his dark past in the shadows, by the 1950s, Von Braun has become a celebrated figure in America. His teenage dreams began to materialize when the US Navy and Army agree on a joint satellite project. Initially assigned to the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, he plays a pivotal role in developing the Redstone rocket. A direct descendant of the V2, showcases his technical prowess and leadership skills, accumulating in a successful launch in 1953. It even has the capability to carry nuclear missiles. Hitler would again be proud of him. Fortunately, as the Cold War progresses, the urgency for space exploration intensifies while the demand for nuclear weapons begins to wane. The Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik, the first ever artificial satellite in 1957, propels von Braun's work into the spotlight. In 1958, he plays a key role in establishing NASA and the Explorer program, achieving the US's first successful satellite launch with Explorer 1 on January 31st, 1958. This monumental success not only validates his efforts, but also solidifies his reputation as a visionary scientist. Does his decade-long experience in rocket construction finally pay off? Maybe, though the thousands of victims of the past have the right to think otherwise. With the success of Explorer 1, von Braun's role in NASA expands, and he becomes the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. He focuses on developing the Saturn rocket series, which is essential for human spaceflight. The Saturn I rocket is designed to launch unmanned missions, while the Saturn 1B and Saturn V rockets are developed to carry astronauts to the moon. The latter, particularly, becomes the workhorse of the Apollo program. The Apollo program represents a monumental challenge, and von Braun's leadership is crucial. He oversees the engineering and design processes, ensuring that the Saturn V is capable of overcoming the immense gravitational pull of Earth that will eventually land humans on the moon. Pressure to succeed is, of course, immense. It might even resemble the pressure he stood on from his previous bosses in Germany. Nazi Germany wanted to expand on Earth. The US, just on space. For sure, these are two totally different things, aren't they? Finally, the unbelievable is achieved. In July 1969, Apollo 11 successfully lands astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the lunar surface while Michael Collins orbits above. Armstrong's famous words,
"That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind,"
echo across the world, symbolizing not just a national victory, but the accumulation of von Braun's lifelong aspirations. It's the definition of a happy ending. Wernher von Braun stands out as one of the most controversial figures of the 20th century. It's astonishing to see how he escaped judgment for his role in Nazi crimes while being rewarded for it, privilege few others have enjoyed. As the Cold War sentiments recede, I find myself grappling with the cult of personality that surrounds him and the uncomfortable truth that is gradually revealed. Was he a true pioneer or merely an opportunist? Personally, I lean toward the latter. Von Braun's assertion the scientists aren't responsible for how their work is used strikes me as a convenient excuse. It feels disingenuous that he so readily abandoned the Nazis when their fortunes declined, hopping onto the US military bandwagon without any introspection about the moral implications of such a shift.
In return for their scientific knowledge.
The V2 was something we had and you didn't have. Naturally, you wanted to know all about it.
I can't help but question how someone so intelligent could act without considering the weight of their choices. While some might argue that he was simply trying to survive under the brutal regime, this defense loses its strength after 1950. He had every opportunity to express remorse for the victims of his V2 rockets and the slave laborers who suffered and died in the construction of those weapons. Yet, he dismissed their deaths as mere collateral damage in wartime, which is deeply concerning. To turn a blind eye to the horrors happening right under his nose at the Dora camp is, to me, an unforgivable moral failure. I can, however, acknowledge that von Braun may have been young and somewhat naive, perhaps even exploited by the Nazis. However, it's hard to overlook the complicity of the US government and media. They enabled his ascent while actively working to erase his past. The same government that prosecuted Nazi crimes refused to send him back to Germany to testify at the Dora trial, and the American media largely turned a blind eye. And frankly, I think I understand why von Braun made use of it. I mean, who wouldn't? Ultimately, von Braun's legacy forces us to confront a disturbing reality. Knowledge can be wielded for the wrong purposes. I hope for the best from brilliant minds, but his struggle serves as a painful reminder that even the most gifted individuals can struggle with the moral decisions we desperately wish they would make. It leaves me with lingering questions about the ethical responsibilities of scientists and how easily ambition can cloud one's judgment.